Carlos Nelson with What's Up Worldwide. And today we're introducing a new host to one of the newest worldwide segments that we're debuting. Who do we have here?
My name is Jacquelyn Aguirre. I was born and raised in Kansas City, and I'm going to be heading the WhatsApp group on What's Up group on Latinx issues. You'll notice I'll be using the term Latinx throughout all of my videos and interviews. Latinx is a gender inclusive term that's coming up, especially among the younger generation in the Latino, Latina communities, kind of meant to erase some of the genderization that's very prevalent in the Spanish language. So the guest that I have with me today is Jazmin Flete. Would you like to introduce yourself, or would you like me to do it?
Sure, I can introduce myself. As Jackie said, my name is Jazmin Flete. I am from Lawrence, Massachusetts, born in Harlem. My family is from the Dominican Republic, and I'm very excited to be speaking here today.
So Jazmin and I met at the University of Notre Dame, where we both did our undergraduate degrees, and while we were there, kind of got pushed together in our dorm as some of the only Latinx people who were there, and really kind of I found my community in her and a support system to kind of get me through a primarily white institution. And while we were there, we really got into a lot of really deep, important conversations about some of the issues and major talking points that we both noticed in our separate communities, separate but joined. I'm Mexican American, so we have different parts of our Latinx identity, but we're often grouped together, especially in the US. And this is something we kind of talked about, is that, Jazmin looks Latino, Latina, Latinx, so a lot of times people assume she's Mexican or something like that. And that's kind of what I wanted to start off talking about today, is kind of how you view your place individually and as a member of the Dominican community within the broader Latinx identity.
Excuse me. Where's Jazmin at right now?
Where are you at, Jazz?
I'm currently in the Dominican Republic.
All right. All right. I want our guests to know where you're at versus where we're at and what have you. Go ahead.
Caribbean. Had to flee from the winter.
What part of the Dominican are you in? Let our audience know that.
Yeah, I'm in La Vega, which is a city in the Cibao region. It's in the northern western part of the island. It's almost in the center, but it's one of the most beautiful cities in the DR. But maybe I'm a little biased.
Okay, so yeah, how do you view kind of your connection personally and as a broader community to the Latinx identity?
So this is something I've given a lot of thought about because, of course, like Jackie said, I look Latinx, but I find myself asking, what does that mean? Do I just look like a stereotype? I'm tan, I have black hair, but when you really start to look at what it is to be Latinx, I don't feel that. I'm Caribbean. My parents are Caribbean. My grandparents are Black. My mom is mixed. My dad is as well. So it's like, I look Latinx, and those are the experiences that I live. So I'm often caught in between, do I identify as this because it's the way I'm perceived as, or do I not identify as this because it's just not my background, it's not my ancestry, and it doesn't speak to my culture. So I'm oftentimes, I feel disconnected, internally, but physically I understand why I am associated to the Latinx community. I mean, geographically speaking as well, I am Latinx because the Dominican Republic is in Latin America. But as far as culture, there's a disconnect for me.
There's another interesting facet that we often talked about, which is Spanish, whether or not you can speak Spanish. So you're fluent in Spanish and several other languages, by the way. I would like to throw that out there for everybody. I brag about this constantly. Jazz, quick sidebar. What are all the languages that you speak?
Okay, just a quick note. I did study languages in college. I speak Portuguese, French, Italian, Spanish, and English.
Yes, just give it up for Brown excellence. We love that. So we often have this conversation about Spanish. You're fluent in Spanish. I'm not. I internally often identify as Latinx, and you usually don't. And something that we kind of ran into at school, especially from students who were, studying at the university but were born in Latin American countries, was if you don't speak Spanish, you can't be considered Latinx. And that's kind of something I experience a little bit with the Mexican community, more in Mexico and like first generation people from Mexico rather than, families that have been in the US for a while. What's your take on that?
I think it's very inaccurate. Just because you don't speak Spanish doesn't make you less Latinx. I mean, people in Spain speak Spanish. They're not Latinx, but just because, I don't know, my mind just like that came out not how I wanted it to. But like you look at, let's say, Brazilians. Brazilians don't speak Spanish. They are Latinx. Haitians don't speak Spanish. They are Latinx. Your language does not determine whether you are Latinx or not. It's your culture, where you're from, where you grew up, and where you were born, and how you identify as or how you are perceived. Those are the things that can determine this identity of Latinidad. But
Right.
I think if you don't speak Spanish, but you are obviously Mexican, you are Latinx. If you don't speak Portuguese, but you're obviously Brazilian, whatever that may look like, because Brazil, like a lot of different Latin American countries, very diverse racially, you're still Brazilian.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
Say what you just said in all the different languages to the people that are listening in the languages that about Latinx. Run it down.
Well, to be Latinx is really to
in Spanish. I'm saying talk in Spanish.
Whip out your language skills.
Yeah, there we go.
Ok, ya entendí. Ok. Ser latino o latina o latinx no significa saber español, porque si usted mira a un brasileño, ellos no hablan español, ellos hablan portugués, pero son latinos, sí son latinos, sigue siendo latino. ¿Por qué? Porque son de Brasil. Brasil le pertenece al continente latinoamericano. O los haitianos, que son latinos también, no hablan el español, pero son latinos. ¿Por qué? Son de Haití y Haití está en Latinoamérica. Una persona que no hable español, que no hable portugués, que no hable criollo francés, no es menos latino que cualquier otra persona que hable uno de su otro idioma. Eso pienso yo. No es que lo pienso, es que lo sé.
Wonderful. Beautiful. We love it. Kind of going back to Haiti, DR and Haiti share a landmass, they're neighbors. And they have a bit of a turbulent relationship at times. What do you think that's rooted in?
Well, there's a lot of.
Not ready to go into your Spanish?
There are so many factors that play a role in that, relationship. But I think the biggest issue, the root of the problem, is definitely white supremacy. You said DR in Haiti, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely white supremacy. DR is majority Black country, just like Haiti. Now, the issue is that white supremacy is definitely a lot more, I don't know if accepted is the word, but I think DR has been so colonized that at this point it's almost impossible to unlearn all of these things that come from their colonization. We have a lot of issues with
they're deep rooted systemically into almost the DNA of Haiti.
What was that?
Of DR.
All right. Before we got on camera, and I talked to you about my travels around the world, and I have a Hispanic, Spanish ancestor, uh, and when you look at uh, Hispaniola in general, it seems like the presidents all have fair skin, like uh, Jacquelyn. And no matter what the population uh, physical makeup is as it relates to their skin tone, when it comes to leadership positions, and I think that's bringing the conversation back into your court, what you were saying about the deep rooted colonization and white supremacy still is very uh, deep in the consciousness of quite a few of the Latin nations. I think so.
No, definitely. I mean, it's not even a matter of you think it is, you know it. That's just a fact. It's in DR we have a lot of white leaders ruling a majority black country. It doesn't, the leadership here doesn't represent the population that lives here. And there's so many things that are very evidently, based in this white supremacy. And just going back to the initial question, that's really at the core of the relations between Haiti and DR. I mean, it's not to say, I don't want to say that either country, that it's the same thing, same
How
country,
do they
same
get the
culture.
power? This is
Two
what I
very
want to
different.
ask you. How do you think that white supremacy, not just in the mind that uh, uh, the white or the European viewpoint and the European connections that the leadership has to uh, the outside European world keeps them in power with money, weapons, or what?
I think it's just so complex. There are a lot of different factors that play a role. I mean, when you look at it from a historic perspective, like point of view, white people have had, power over a lot of things, including, economics, class, social, whatever, anything you can think of, white people had the say, the majority, the rule, whatever. So that you see that today, and the access people have to education, to jobs, to property they own, live in, whatever. And then you see that in leadership as well. It's like you can trace all these famous people here on the island that are white, all these white politicians, back to probably some European ruler that established that connection and that power in the island some point centuries ago. So, like for example, one of our legends, one of our most loved icons, his name is Juan Luis Guerra. I think, or he's a descendant of some king or something like that, or maybe it's his goddaughter, but they're all related in some way to some king from England, or not England, one of the UK. I don't even remember,
Right.
but
Well,
somewhere
one of
in
the
Europe.
westernized
But
countries,
just
like they did Africa. I'm saying
yes,
you got one continent now. You got all these little different uh, petty fiefdoms, Nigeria, and this and that. So I think that's some of the issues that uh, Jacquelyn, I call her Jack, uh, wants to bring out about Latin America as a whole with her new program, What's Up Latin America, to talk about some of these things. And I don't think if guests like yourself, younger generation, Latino X generation, these people are making decisions that are going to affecting you right now and will be affecting your kids. And you need to have a voice. And that voice is being provided by Jack and Cascade Media Group. And hopefully your generation, some of these interviews will get out to your generation, because so that they can start having more of an open discussion, so that some changes can be made. Here, I was on my LinkedIn page and seen today that uh, Ashley Bland Manlove, she's the new head of the Black Missouri Caucus here, person, openly gay person in that position. And they born the way they born and should not be penalized. And I think that is what Jack is trying to do on uh, many different levels of what's going on in the overall Hispanic community.
Absolutely. And one issue that kind of dovetails a little bit with what we were just talking about with, this history of colonization in Latin America is anti-Black sentiment. So this is, I'm Mexican, not from Mexico, but even in the Mexican communities that have been in the US a long time, there's this undercurrent of anti-Black sentiment that kind of dates back to the structure, the power structure, social structure in Mexico, which favors, lighter skin, Eurocentric features. Um, I studied, Spanish and Latin American literature at school, as well as history. And I'm not Cuban. I've never been to Cuba, but one of the, focuses of one of my papers was the sexualization of Black women in Cuba in the 19th century. Um, and I was kind of wondering, I say kind of wondering, we've had these conversations before, but this anti-Black sentiment, does it manifest, stronger, not as strong, or in different ways in DR, which is a country that is predominantly Black?
How about giving us a 1 to 10 rating?
Yeah, how intense is the anti-Black sentiment in DR, or is it something that maybe isn't as pronounced on the island versus, Dominican populations in the US or something like that?
I think it definitely depends on which generation you're addressing or asking about. The older generations on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say are maybe, and I think they're anti-Black unconsciously, but on this scale, I would say maybe like a 7, 8. Younger generations are definitely unlearning a lot of that and taking the time and initiative to educate themselves on their history, to educate themselves on the colonization of this island, to educate themselves on race, ethnicity, the differences between those. Um, so I think it depends on who you're asking about. But older generations are definitely anti-Black.
So, as somebody who is usually perceived as Latinx, but who has Black ancestry, how do you kind of, I guess, balance those two identities? We've kind of talked about how um, the experiences you live are more Latinx because that's the way that you're perceived. Do you find tension with that Latinx perception versus your ancestry and kind of the culture that you grew up in?
um, I don't know if tension is the word. I definitely feel some frustration sometimes because Dominicans do consider themselves Latinx. I kind of steer away from that because of what I know what it means in the US and because I know that Latinx oftentimes excludes Black people. And so that's my reasoning behind that, and I know a lot of Dominicans in the U.S. feel the same way that I do, as far as being excluded from the Latinx community. Um, as far as trying to find that connection between both, a tension, I wouldn't say frustration is definitely more so what I feel because I know that Latinx can also mean Black, and it's oftentimes not considered, Black. It's not inclusive of Black. Um, so I know geographically speaking, I'm Latinx, but I think that is all that extends to because Latinx is not a culture; it just refers to your geography. Um, but I don't know if that answers the question or not.
It definitely does. Something that I've noticed in my personal experiences is Mexican in America is like significantly different than Mexican in Mexico, or even Mexican like on the border in the Rio Grande Valley, in the Tejano region of Texas. These, they're different cultures. Being Mexican in Missouri is different than being Mexican right across the border, which is different than being Mexican in central Mexico, southern Mexico, stuff like that. And for me, the differences are kind of a mix between distance and time. So Missouri's pretty far away geographically from the border, and my family's been here for like 100 years at this point, 105 years at this point. So, through that experience, there's been a lot of pressure on my grandparents, my parents to conform to a more American identity. But a lot of, like food, religion, family values, stuff like that has still kind of stuck with my family that are perceived as traditionally Mexican. You were born in the US, but you have lived pretty much in both. You spent a lot of time in the US, you spent a lot of time in DR. Your parents are from DR, they spend a lot of time there. Um, what are the biggest differences, I guess, that you see between being Dominican in DR and being Dominican in the US?
Being Dominican in the U.S., it's interesting because Dominicans, I feel like, don't really, their presence in the U.S. isn't one that's been here for a while, like the Mexican presence. Dominicans just started arriving to the U.S. like yesterday. So it's like you're raised very Dominican like you would be raised on the island. The only difference is that when I'm here, I am American though, because I was born in the U.S. I'm not Dominican unless I, get my Dominican passport. Then I would be Dominican. But which that doesn't, that doesn't bother me at all because I am American by nationality. But I don't know if there's really much difference because I was raised in Dominican culture just somewhere else.
Right. Kind of going off of this, so you're from Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is right outside Boston. Um, a Dominican enclave in a way, very strong, vibrant, proud Dominican community in Lawrence. I grew up in the suburbs in Kansas City, Missouri, which is very not ethnic at all, surrounded by a lot of white people, a lot of Caucasians. I had a wonderful like growing up experience. But it wasn't really until I got to college that I was able to kind of form connections with people who were not Caucasian. And I know that's kind of a unique experience because we went to Notre Dame, which is a primarily white institution. There's not a lot of diversity there in terms of, skin color, etc. So I know that we kind of had opposite experiences in that way. I was kind of coming to a place that didn't look any different than where I was from, but was still able to form connections with people who weren't Caucasian. And I'm kind of wondering the differences that you went through in experience, coming from a primarily Dominican environment into a primarily white institution.
Yeah. I mean that was the biggest difference is that my school was literally like my city is like 98% Dominican. People don't even speak English in my city. Everyone speaks Spanish, and it's Dominican Spanish, and everyone is black or brown, and it's having gone from that to Notre Dame, which is very white, very just very white. It was very there was
Very
I don't know if
Irish.
very Irish, yes. I don't know if culture shock is the word, but it was
It's
I'll
the
say
word.
that
You used the right word.
it was culture shock for sure. I was just like, oh my god, I don't know where I am. Why did I do this? This is not where I'm from. This does not represent me. Like, I just, like, you took this little Dominican girl from Dominican City, put her smack in the middle of the Midwest with a bunch of white people. I was like, where am I? Luckily, Dominicans, culturally speaking, are very social people, very friendly. So that helped me with, you know, meeting people, making friends, just being very welcoming of people that don't look like me and don't relate to me and my background. But yeah, it was very unique and different experience. But I'm very grateful for it.
Me too. It brought us together.
Yes.
So, you're talking about Dominican culture is very sociable, very friendly. And, from what I know of you, your family, 110% true. Did you find a similar reception from the Caucasian community, from other Latinx communities that were at Notre Dame?
No, not at all. I mean, but I might not feel what I felt is probably due to the fact that, you know, people of other cultures aren't as receptive as my culture. So it's probably not that they were intentionally rejecting me, but and I'm speaking specifically about, the white audience, white population, just very different from me, and that's okay. And it's something that I had to learn. As
See,
far as
ho,
other
ho, ho, ho. See, you say you had to learn. Where I'm from, they got to learn. Because
well, yes,
everybody's
yes.
got to learn what's going on in European. And that's not how the world works. Excuse me
No, this is
for
true. But
breaking
what
things
I mean is the difference in culture is that I learned not to take things personal, because not everyone is Dominican like I am. Not everyone is as social as I am. And like, of course they had to learn as well, oh, she's just friendly, but people don't really learn they're friendly, oh, she's friendly because of this. People learn, oh, they're not friendly because of that.
Well,
So that's what I mean by
I've traveled around the world for a long time. And what I found out about how the world perceives Americans, and they don't perceive Black Americans, they perceive us as everybody's got to learn English. Most countries, if you travel around the world, you're not no exception. Most countries, they speak 3-4 languages because that's what they have to do to communicate to the mixed pot that's in this world. Americans, everything got to be in the dollar bill and in their language.
And Jazmin can definitely speak to being brown elsewhere in the world as well. So you spent a summer in Brazil, and you spent a semester in Italy, yeah?
Yes.
So
run it down, Jazz. Run it down what Italy and what that was like. Run it down how you felt when you got in the country. Run it down, your interaction, and then go to the next country.
Well, in Italy, I was there for a few months. I was there for 5 months, if I'm not mistaken. That, oof, that was an experience. I mean, being there, people, which is very interesting. People didn't see me as Latina. People saw me as Arab, which I was like, what? But I know that Europeans don't necessarily have the best perception. They're very racist, and they do not like Arabs. They don't like people from the Middle East. People that look like me have my features, and so I did get a lot of very ugly looks out there. And I was traveling. I was in Spain, surprisingly, my colonizers, and they pulled me aside for drugs. They checked me. I was like, huh? I'm a college student. Why you think I got drugs? And it was an interesting experience out there for sure. There were a lot of different experiences. Oh, I was on a bus and I got pulled off. I was asked for documentation for ID.
In Italy?
Yes, yeah. On my way to class, morning. This was 8:30 in the morning. And I kept telling them, oh, I'm American, I'm not from here, like, just leave me alone. And they were like, no, we need to see ID, we need to see passport, we need to see this, that. I was like, oh my goodness. So that wasn't my first time in
So
Italy.
that's profiling European style.
Which is really
Yes,
interesting because Jazmin speaks Italian. She's fluent in Italian. So it's not like she's running through, a separate country like Americans do when they're abroad, speaking a language that isn't native, acting culturally taboo, like she's about to say. She's been to Italy before. She, has at least a vague grasp of what's socially normal in Italy. So a lot of her experiences here are based solely on how she looks. It's not like she's fluent in Italian and she knows what Italian culture at least vaguely expects of her in terms of acting in public. She's all these experiences are based completely on the fact that she doesn't have traditionally Italian features.
Yeah, no. And I was there prior to this experience. I had been there when I was in high school, and this was a summer experience. So I'm always a little darker in the summer. And, they thought I was black out there, and they called me the N-word in Italian. I was like, oh, excuse me. But it wasn't.
Let's keep it moving to the other country.
Yes. Brazil was different. Brazil was amazing.
You say you speak Dutch?
She speaks Portuguese.
Portuguese. That's what I meant to say. Portuguese. Go ahead.
Yes, Brazil was lovely. I love Brazil. I have been there twice now. Hopefully I get to go this year if it's safer to travel now.
Tell them that they Latinx in Portuguese.
Huh?
Can you talk about your experience a little bit in Portuguese as well?
Tell the for Latinx that Portuguese that might look at this, run it down to them.
I'll say it in English first. So yeah, Brazil was a very beautiful country, very beautiful people, society. I think the reason why it did have such a great time out there and why I was so socially accepted though was because I am light, I am mulata, I am kind of the standard beauty there where I'm light and I have dark straight hair.
The girl from Ipanema.
What was that?
The girl from Ipanema. Have you ever heard that by Stan Getz? All right, that's who you are.
Yes. So I think that definitely lent a lot to my experience there, for sure. But very different experiences between the one I had in Brazil and what I had in Italy, for sure.
Well, tell them, if you speak a little Portuguese, tell them that they Latinx the same way you did in Hispaniola.
Ok, os brasileiros são também latinos. Vocês falam português, mas falar português, falar espanhol, falar francês é todo o mesmo. São sempre latinos, né?
All right. Got
He's
something
wonderful.
for everybody out here. That's what Jack's doing with What's Up Latin America. Yeah, that's what's up.
She's wonderful, a phenomenon. One other thing, while we're kind of still vaguely in the realm of things that happened at Notre Dame, kind of one thing we both sort of experienced to different degrees at Notre Dame was kind of a culture shock in terms of wealth. Notre Dame is quite an expensive school, so a lot of people who go there have, high income families who are not really struggling as much with tuition. It's more available to them. I'm from a, pretty middle class family, so we're very well off. I'm very blessed, have a wonderful house. My parents have great jobs. My brother and I have never wanted for anything. But Notre Dame was very much a stretch financially for us. It was a lot. And for me, it was a lot to be there surrounded by people who had so much money, because that wasn't really an experience I was used to. And something that I found particularly interesting was a lot of, exchange students who were there from Latin America almost felt as different to me as the majority Caucasian population, which I'm sure they're not going to like, but spoke Spanish fluently, and we're coming from very wealthy households, and a
That's
lot
what I
of
was
times
getting ready to
we're
say.
very light. Exactly. And
You
so
see that? Hold it. I'm cutting you off a minute. Do you see that as this pompousness, this arrogance? To me, because I'll be around them campuses and some of these kids coming from these wealthy families abroad, and they get on and they identify with Europeans more than they identify with people that people of color in the country that they're in.
Well, they are white. It's important to really,
No, I'm
not
saying dark skinned
oh, different.
Latinos and whether
Oh,
they
that's
be
Well,
Chinese, whether they be whatever, that's what I noticed when they come to America. Like last night, I was looking at a rerun of uh, a fight with Oscar De La Hoya when he was the Golden Boy and he was fighting the guy now. He's been the champ anyway, and they said the announcer said every rich Mexican south of the border is at this fight. All the rich families. That struck me. About all of the big ponderosas in Mexico, they were at that fight in Las Vegas. And that's how I see when these kids come over from these type families, no matter whether it's Chinese, Latin, or whatever, they come here and they identify mostly, they have their community that they identify, but they act like Europeans, like they're better than everybody else. And I think that's what you were alluding to. And I don't want really no blowback because you're saying Notre Dame. You're not hating on Notre Dame or any.
no.
I find that, well, I'm saying a lot of times you got to clear because people
Right.
will say, oh, she said this. I'm saying because we're in the college community. I find this has been really, especially over the last quarter century. It wasn't so much before in my era when they were coming over. They were grateful. They were happy. That we're talking 50 years ago. They were happy to be in the United States. They were happy to anybody black, anybody that was reaching out to them. They were happy. It's changed. I don't. And I think
Right.
all of that comes from taking on the values of Europeans, and that is the dollar over family, over community, and such. Sorry for taking over, but I thought.
No worries. I will pop in a little bit and say I am hating on Notre Dame a little bit, but it's from like an affectionate place as somebody who went there. I feel like Jazz and I do this a lot, which is go back and forth on some of the things we think Notre Dame could do better. And we kind of hate on them a little bit, but we're very protective of it from like other people
But you
hating
love
on it.
Notre Dame.
I do adore Notre Dame. Exactly. And
I
had wonderful experiences there. I met a lot of wonderful people there. And, our criticisms are coming from a place of affection, I think, because we had such a good time at Notre Dame and we want other people in our communities to be able to enjoy the same experiences that we had as well. We want to, encourage more of an
How
outreach.
I look at that is like what you seen at the Capitol. All right, what you've seen in America over the last 4 years, and I'm not talking about Trump. It's been going on for a long time. Senator John McCain, where real patriots, when you see the danger, even though everybody else is on that page, you step up. And how I'm looking at what you're saying about Notre Dame has nothing to do but, hey, I'm here. I went here. I love here. These are some things that I think can improve the social and you might put some things in place because when you did your Way with the Future interview, you remember all the other girls from different part of the countries that did the same interview when they talked about from kindergarten to high school, all of y'all had the same experience. Uh, Around fifth grade, you start noticing that you were different because you went to these white Catholic schools per se, and then you start seeing a little more difference in the teacher's preference and all of these. And so if you don't talk about it, who's going to straighten it out?
Exactly.
And they should be glad that they produce people like you that are saying, I'm part of that multi melting pot that had this experience, and I had a good experience, but it could have been better if some of these things. That's what I feel you're bringing home, both of you.
Kind of going back to the original setup for this question, which was the kind of wealth gap that we experienced a little bit when we went to school. I guess this is really broad, and I'm not asking for like a gospel answer, but just kind of like your perspective on the wealth gap in general, both like in education and general American life when it comes to Latinx people, brown people, people who kind of look like us, especially as brown women.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Just kind of sort of your opinions on the wealth gap in education and in like American life broadly for brown people and brown women in particular.
Yeah, I definitely think there simply aren't enough opportunities for Latinx, inclusive of all people who identify as such, to really, there just aren't enough opportunities educationally. There aren't enough professional opportunities to advance your class. There's just so many things that are set up to serve as obstacles and to kind of knock Black people, people of color, indigenous people down, that it just makes it so difficult, and therefore just kind of keeps widening that gap.
Right. Education specifically. So you're working at a nonprofit right now. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah. So I work for Sociedad Latina, is a nonprofit in Boston, youth development nonprofit. My role there is I am their program coordinator for our middle school program, after school program. And we work closely with Boston University to create curriculum. We also work with Amigos US. They're a big initiative funded by Google to create professional and educational opportunities in STEM for Latinx students. Um, and, having worked there and having realized, the need that is there for the Latinx community as a whole, I just adds to my statement that there just aren't enough opportunities educationally. There aren't enough scholarships for Latinx youth. There isn't enough there aren't enough people, Latinx people, representing the community in STEM, in really anything professionally. They're not paid enough. They I don't even know what the stat is, but Latina women make up a very small percentage of like degree holders in the US. Yes, it's the gap is very just there.
I name it egregious.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm in law school right now, and 2% of lawyers in the US are Latinx women. So that was a fun statistic going in there. Kind of related to this a little bit, but this is a little sensitive, so I'm just going to throw that out there right now. There's a lot of pushback in white communities, especially when it comes to programs like affirmative action, diversity training, sensitivity programs aimed at broadening the people of color, Black, Indigenous populations in in schools, in higher education, in workplaces. Kind of two opinions on this. Do you think affirmative action and programs like that are doing enough and that they're coming from a good place? And kind of the second part of that is, what would you say to some of that criticism?
Mhm. I've seen a lot of, arguments made for both sides. I think in a society like the one that exists in the US that is so predominantly white, I think it's definitely necessary. Um, and when we got countries like France that, they they will reject you based off of your last name. And so affirmative action definitely prevents things like that from happening. I think we could definitely do more though. It's sad that we need such policies and programs in place to combat, this racism, discrimination in hiring, but it's necessary, it's needed. Yeah, that's my opinion on it. It's just it's not enough, but it's still necessary.
Conversations I've had about the subject kind of tend to skew around like, we wish that these programs were not, you're not the only one that wish these programs weren't necessary. We wish these programs weren't necessary too. We wish that we were able to be judged only on our merit. But in my experience, the fact is that people look at my last name, people look at my picture, people look at, my first name, Jacquelyn, that's a female name. And that's kind of on the forefront of their mind without programs that kind of force them to consider me anyway. um, that's kind of the consensus that I've come to with a lot of people, which is like, I wish that my identity was able to just be my identity. I wish that it wasn't a battleground also, but the reality that I'm living in is that it is a battleground, and there's so many obstacles in our way that this is just a way of somewhat removing one of them out of the hundreds of thousands that there are.
And it's not enough.
Hey, Jazz, in closing, what would be some of your closing statements that you would want the Latino X community to know, uh, that you feel are important for them to get involved in?
There are so many different ways
Well,
that can answer this
give
question,
them three or
honestly.
four. You can't do everything on one show, but you can. I'm sure that Jack will be having you back working with her in some capacity, and slowly but surely you will be able to make some baby steps and pulling your generation together.
Mm-hmm.
So what
I
you have to
think
say
it's
to them?
very important. Yeah, definitely. I think it's very important for the Latinx community as a whole to hold each other accountable. If you see someone being anti-black or racist, hold them accountable. Uphold those consequences. If you see someone being classist, hold them accountable. I think in part of what comes with accountability is education, and in a way also unlearning a lot of our colonized mentalities and ideas, and educating yourself on your own country's history, and understanding the role that you play in this Latinx society as a whole. Um, so that is the main thing is really accountability.
Run it down to them
You're
in
accountable. You
Spanish.
teach yourself.
Run it down to them in Spanish too.
Eh, Para todos los latinos que están viendo este video, necesitan, oh my God, se me olvidó cómo decir esa palabra, necesitan tener cuenta de, de las consecuencias de, ¿cómo lo digo? Quiero que ustedes hagan responsable y le den consecuencia a las personas que ustedes vean que sean racistas, clasistas, y en eso necesitan educarse y también, bueno, solo eso, educarse en tus mentalidades que a veces son ideas súper colonizadas, y también aprender de tu historia, de dónde vienen gente, de dónde viene tu cultura, de dónde viene tu país. Todo lo que tú piensas, tú tienes que estudiarlo y saber de dónde viene. Porque tú no puedes pretender que lo voy a dejar ahí lo dejo. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Beautiful, as always. I guess my last closing tagline for Latinos, in the words of the revered Claudia Flores, we must be impatient for change. Let us remember that our voice is a precious gift and we must use it.
And as I always say, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
Program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.